What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Wrist Cheese Radio podcast. We are on episode 27 in your home for orological hot takes, taboo topics, and often unpopular watch opinions. I'm your co-host, Brodinky, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Schmidt. Schmidt, what's going on, brother?
Nothing much, my friend. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I'm having a pretty good week. The Wrist Check Pod episode seems to be pretty well received. Having a good time with that.
Yeah, it was good. Shout out to those boys, man. That was honestly a great episode. I really enjoyed listening to it. Glad that you were able to get on.
Definitely, absolutely. I don't think that'll be the last mashup you get between the groups.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. Also, shout out to my buddies over at Whiskey and Watches. Just for the record, I put my pants on both legs at one time. That was actually Mike Stockton asked that. He said,
"Yeah, that's right.
Leg at a time."
You and Buzzy always put both your legs
right
at the same time.
Jump right in.
Just jump in. Just grab life by the horns and just go for it.
But hey, man, when a Fratelli calls you a celebrity, man, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah. Shout out Mike Stockton. Thanks.
He's
buddy.
a great dude. What up, Mike? And then also, I kicked off, in case nobody saw, I kicked off the charitable season. Yeah, I'm going to give away a Moonswatch, so that's going to be cool. So far, up over $1,400, so that's great.
Wow. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's well over the price of that watch.
Oh, yeah,
by
no
a
doubt.
Considerable amount, for sure.
But, so shout out to everybody who's donated. And, same deal as always. I usually do one entry per $10. Draw it random. I tape it, so it's legit. And at the end, somebody's gonna walk away with a Moonswatch for $10. So that's cool.
And you got my favorite of the Moonswatches.
Of course, Mars, man. You got to.
Yeah. The Alaska Mars, and it's Brodinky colors. So
it is.
I mean, you're on brand. You're representing. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and for those who are entered in my 25K strap giveaway, I have not forgotten you, but it takes me a while to make the rounds on that because I have to get the attention of everybody who I draw in order to ask which 20 millimeter, 22 millimeter, what hardware. So it takes me a while to get around. I have not forgotten about you. I'm making the rounds slowly, but I'm getting there. In other news, we do have a guest with us tonight.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
His name is Lorenzo, but you may know him as at Omega Bond Watches. And appropriately tonight, we are going to be talking a little Bond. So without further ado, I will let our friend Lorenzo introduce himself. Lorenzo, why don't you give us a little bit about who you are and what exactly you do in your own content space?
Hey, thanks, bro, and Schmidt for having me on. This is actually kind of strange because I do have a podcast also I do that focuses mostly on the Bond aspect of collecting and sartorial items and, of course, watches. But thanks for having me on. It's nice to flex my horological muscles more than my Bond muscles from time to time. But my channel is basically just what it says it is. It focuses mainly on the screen worn Omega Bond watches, primarily from obviously the Brosnan era and the Daniel Craig era. So, I mean, it's 25 years worth of time since we first saw the Diver 300 on screen in Goldeneye, but up until No Time to Die with obviously the Diver 300, No Time to Die / 007 edition. And a lot has happened in between. There's a lot of questions people have about screen accuracy, mostly in the Bond community. A lot of people just aren't really aware of the differences between the models. And for those true collectors, it really does boil down to those small differences. So that's kind of what my page focuses around. Obviously, I reach out to people about, if they need help finding one of these models or if they have questions about the legitimacy of a purchase. So I kind of do that out of the kindness of my heart because I'm a huge supporter of the brand, and I grew up pretty much at 12 years old loving Omega. So I have seen my taste evolve over time, and I've learned to appreciate other brands, and I'm still fairly new in the watch world as far as it goes, as far as understanding what's really out there as far as like the small boutique kind of brands. But when you're talking about like Rolex and Tudor and Hamilton and all those like major players, like I can speak to those. But when you start getting into, you know, the littler brands that are, you know, more
there's a
trendy,
lot of micros
yeah,
out there.
yeah, micro brands. So like that's why I love listening to you guys, because when you bring those up, I immediately get on my phone and I'm like, okay, what are they talking about? Because I want to educate myself about these things. So I do appreciate what you guys do. So thanks for having me on. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And your podcast is the Blunt Instruments podcast, correct?
Yes, I'm a co-host with my good buddy Luke Taggart. He runs, his handle is Bond's Apartment. So he doesn't focus on furniture or anything like that. He's more or less like he focuses
lifestyle.
Lifestyle. He covers a range, which is cool. But the podcast is like our baby. So like we're pretty consistent. We try to put out an episode every week.
Yeah, and you guys just dropped one yesterday or the day before?
Actually, we recorded yesterday and it'll be out tomorrow. Typically, we drop them on Fridays.
Okay, cool. So Friday drop. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, the Blunt Instruments podcast. And people can find you on, what is it? Apple Podcast.
Yeah, Spotify. We're on all the major ones. You know, we got some fun stats. You know, we're up to like close to 70 episodes now recorded, and we've been doing it for over a year.
Fantastic, man.
Yeah, it's been great. And it's funny how like over time it's evolved. And I'm sure you guys, in the short time you've been out there, we've done like a little over 20 episodes now.
This is 27.
So like I'm sure from your like 10th one till now, you've already like seen some changes in the way you guys kind of go about your business. So it's
for sure.
It's always it's fun to talk to other creators and kind of see their growth process, you know.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. So Lorenzo, thank you for jumping on with us
absolutely.
and bringing some Bond flavor to this, and in a kind of in a rare occurrence. I'm going to take the lead on this. Normally I let bro do it. I like to come off the bench, you know, like I'm a better off the bench player. Yeah, exactly. Right. But
he's my Ginobili.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a topic of mine that I had come across. I was doing a little bit of independent research for some Bond stuff, and basically I came across, and I don't know if it's like a true inaccuracy. I don't know if it's just my mind playing games with me or there's something going on here. But I remember I called you one night many, many months ago, and I was like, hey, can you give me the original reference for the Rolex Submariner that was featured in Dr. No? And I remember you telling me, yeah, it's this reference. It's the 6538. For those of you who are not familiar with vintage Rolex Submariners, I certainly was not. So Lorenzo had to tell me that. And I started digging, and I remember in my search for this, I came across a lot of
inaccuracies,
but I came across a lot of like
inconsistencies.
Yeah, that's probably more what word I'm looking for. Came across a lot of inconsistencies when I look at the watch. It was actually featured in the first few films, right? We have Dr. No, 1962. We have From Russia with Love, which is 1963, I believe.
Yep, that's correct.
And then we have Thunderball, which is 1965. All three of those films at one point in time feature the Rolex Submariner. And I think From Russia with Love, it's a pretty small blip in the entirety of the movie. It's more so in Thunderball and certainly in Dr. No that you see this, right? You have the famous lighter scene in Dr. No, lighting of the watch, which doesn't make sense because the watch is radium, it's glowing.
Actually, you missed my favorite Connery movie, and that was the movie he did that in. That's Goldfinger in 1964.
I'm sorry, Goldfinger. Okay. Goldfinger. Okay. All right. So there you go. So Goldfinger, right? So at least in the film, you see this, right? The lighter scene.
You're seeing that is the first real true shot of the Rolex on Connery's wrist.
And what year again was that film?
That was 1964.
Okay, so basically we're getting like one film a year essentially.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's funny.
That's a crazy turnaround. It's
wild.
Also, they think that at that point they were like $1 million to film at that point. Like you put $1 million down and you make like $5 million.
So what's interesting about this is when I look at the original kind of Google search, right? If I do a Google search of the quintessential like James Bond Submariner. Everywhere that I look, Fratello watches, Houdinki, Antiquorum, Christie's, Bob's watches, it doesn't matter. I get a Rolex 6538 is the reference, right? And for those of you who are not familiar with the kind of classical, Submariners, in many ways, this is the archetypal quote unquote James Bond Submariner. This is the red triangle, big crown, big white lollipop second hand, gilt dial Submariner. And everywhere that I look, people have sold this, marketed it, and talked about it as the James Bond Submariner. However, I cannot find a single image on the internet anywhere from any of the films that he's wearing this watch where this is the exact model that is on his wrist, which doesn't make any sense to me. Because for so many years, people have been talking about this as the Bond Submariner, as it's the archetypal Bond Submariner. There's even homage watches that exist in the community that have these tropes on them. Red triangle, big crown, the gilt hands, all of these things. And yet that's not the one that we see in the film. And specifically when you look at Thunderball, and specifically as you talked about in Goldfinger, right, where he has the lighter scene. I mix this up. I was thinking about that as the first one, but it's not. So you're looking at this, and those watches don't look at all the same. So what I came across is in early Rolex Submariner kind of references, there's two major references that come up. There's the 6536 and the 6538. Everyone says that the 6538 is the Bond Submariner, but the 6536, in some ways, people still kind of rope it in as a James Bond Submariner because it does share a lot of similarities between the two references. Now, the major discrepancy between these two references comes down to a few key things. First and foremost is the crown. The 6536 has a pretty small sized crown, whereas the 6538 is the big crown variation, right? The 6536 in many ways has a kind of traditional bezel without any type of graduations on the 15-minute mark. Now, there was some kind of, models that did feature this later points in production, but for the most part, from what I can see, it's a silver triangle bezel in black with no 15-minute countdown scale. All right. Then you have a lollipop second hand, which can be done in one of two ways. Either a large white lollipop with a giant plot at the end, or a gilt finish one, which matches the handset, also with a large lollipop at the end. And then you have the text on the dial. Most 6536s have Oyster Perpetual and Rolex at the top. And at the 6 o'clock position, you have the water resistancy, which on this model was 100 meters. And then the word Submariner. That's it. So it's 100 meters, the feet rating, and then sub. Now, by contrast, the 6538, you start to see some of these other tropes, right? You have the big crown. A lot of them will have a red triangle on them, but they also will feature a 15-minute graduation scale for the countdown on the decompression stop for the bezel. You still have, the depth rating at 6 o'clock with Submariner, but the depth rating has now been increased to 200 meters. And you have kind of a bigger, beefier case, which was another kind of thing that they rolled out that was a difference between the two models. But when I look at both of these references and I compare them to the image of the Rolex Submariner that I see in Goldfinger, that I see in Thunderball, none of these references directly line up with what I see on screen. And what trips me out, as you kind of touched on this earlier about screen accuracy, right? This is huge to the Bond community. And I don't know if I'm just losing my mind or I'm taking crazy pills or I'm just that uneducated about Rolex vintage references. But to me, this seems kind of like a big deal because the references that are being touted as the reference that was worn in the film is not actually the one that's been worn in the film. It may be the same reference number, but it's not the screen accurate watch, because the one he has in the film, the case looks like it's a 6536. It looks like it's a skinny case because of the lugs. It has a big crown, but it has a black bezel without a red triangle marker, right?
Right.
There's no graduations on it. Yet the dial text has Rolex Oyster Perpetual at the top. It's a 2-liner at the bottom, and it has a depth rating, which we can't make out. It's just too hard to see. And then Submariner. But the ultimate kicker here is the second hand. It's a gilt finish, but it has a small lollipop tip on it. So it's almost like you're taking both attributes from both references, combining them into one timepiece, and that's what's worn on screen. And I just cannot wrap my head around how, why, and why is the community at large not really kind of focusing on this? Because nowhere have I seen it brought up on anybody or any social media forum, whatever.
Either community, right?
Not that I can gather.
Yeah, so I did a little research myself, and first of all, let me be clear, I am not a Rolex vintage master, no say at all, but I do know a little bit about this model because of its status and what it means to the Bond community. And I can tell you this, the Rolex 6538 ceased production in 1959. So that's we're looking at
a few years before the
years
films.
before. So at this point, you're kind of like, all right, well, it's a discontinued model, so that gives us a little hint to move forward with. Also, there's the fact of everyone says there's a red triangle, but there's no evidence of a red triangle in any of the images,
Correct.
like you said. So it's like, as we're piecing this piece by piece, it's kind of like, wait a minute, where is this all coming from when you're looking at the standard models that are being sold and then you're cross-referencing them? I mean, screen accuracy is screen accuracy, but I think this gets overlooked because, I mean, I'll be honest, look at the amount of money they're charging for these things.
Yep.
I mean, when I see a 6-figure price tag, I'm not really like, oh, let me do my research. You know, it's like, I'm just not going to own that shit. Like, that's the first thing I say, you know, unless I win the lottery. But there's that facet of it. And then there's the whole aspect of it of like when people reference Rolex to Bond, you know, current Bond, to me, it's like the sub we see nowadays, the 2020 sub has very little design notes compared to the original that Bond wore.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know, like, and now there's the thought that it could have been Frankenstein, or the parts are not, you know, the original that were designed for that particular model, you know, and who knows, like, this is the 60s we're talking about here. Like, it's not like they have
a Wild West.
Yeah, there's no service center. You're not sending your shit in there like stamping out brand new metal pieces for your watch. Like,
yeah,
no,
Lord knows how long it took to get parts.
Yeah, or molds to make those parts. Like, it's just like, or to hand make them, whatever they were doing at that point. So there's a lot of room for error here, and we haven't said it, but there's always a chance that it was a fake. I mean,
Yeah,
I know. Like,
yeah. I mean, I don't, you know, having seen it, I don't think that that's the case.
Yeah, I don't either. But
talk about Skyfall.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right, exactly. But it certainly begs the question, though, because I know, having met you and having been, I mean, we met at the early part of last year, I believe,
May
May of last year.
Yep.
And we met in the same way that we're conversing now. We met online, which is, again, it's kind of a weird thing to admit out loud as grown men, but it's true. We met online. We started conversing. I slid into his DMs,
bro.
I mean, it was what it was. Like, I slid into his DMs, and we started kind of connecting on Bond stuff and Omega stuff, and that was really cool. So, you know, we have a friendship, which I'm very, very happy for. But I remember,
you know, I love you too.
So what's funny about this, though, is I remember that you know, in kind of the world that you brought me into, because I really didn't know as much about the Bond community, the Bond lifestyle, all these things that you're, you know, a big proponent of, until I really met you. I had kind of an idea, but it was much more from an outward perspective rather than somebody that's in the community. Much the way that I am with watches, like, I'm in the community, right?
Right.
So when I was looking at this and meeting you, I got a lot more access to this. And I remember one of the major things that you told me specifically for yourself and your own collecting journey is you are a big collector that's concerned with screen accuracy. Like all of your watches, you don't collect specialty editions, you don't collect all these kind of novelty fringe things. If the Bond character did not wear that Omega in the film in that exact reference, you don't buy it. Is that right?
That is correct. So this is a very sensitive topic for some individuals. I mean, for me, it's one of those things where I care about that stuff because I mean, that is what was worn on screen. And granted, only one of my references, actually, that's not true. Two of my references aren't 100% screen accurate. One of them because it's impossible to get a screen accurate one unless you Frankenstein it. So that's and I'm referring to the Skyfall Planet Ocean that Daniel Craig wears in the opening scenes of Skyfall.
Can you explain why? Because I don't know if everybody knows this.
Yeah. So Daniel Craig had his Planet Ocean, which is the ceramic matte bezel and the 8500 movement, 42 mil, and black dial. His was made out of titanium, grade 5. And the model that was sold as the Bond watch was steel on steel. So obviously grade 5 titanium plays extremely different than steel on steel. So, and the only reason us Bond collectors found out about it is because Christie's auctioned off one of the 3 pieces that were made specifically for filming. And Daniel Craig's reason behind it was he needed the watch to be lighter because it's such a heavy watch.
Stunts,
for stunts and stuff like that. So it was that's how we found out. I know of one person that bought 8500 blue grade 5 titanium and then bought the steel and had someone swap the bezel and the dial out.
That's a commitment.
That's commitment, but it's like, is it worth, the warranty?
2 watches?
I don't know. As much as I'd love to have a screen accurate one, not at that cost. And not because it's the price, it's more or less because of the factor of this was not a model created by Omega in their factory. It's like I literally went down to some dark door and knocked on it, and out came the screen accurate version.
yeah, for sure. And again, it begs the question too, like serviceability and longevity of that piece. Like you can't send it back to Omega to have that work done.
Yeah,
like,
and
that's good luck.
Yeah,
so,
and then the other thing is like, your serial numbers aren't going to match and stuff like that on certain pieces. So it's just like, is it really worth it at the end of the day?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I struggled with that, and finally I just accepted the fact that Omega is missing a great opportunity for Skyfall's 10th anniversary to re-release that watch as it was on screen and do a limited edition. So I mean, there's always that factor.
Omega, if you are listening, please issue a Skyfall limited edition.
You know where to find me. It's not like you don't know my name. I mean,
you heard it here first, guys.
There's just so many great concepts that could be done instead of slapping 007 on the dial and putting a coat of arms all over the dial and all this other like Mickey Mouse shit like that. I just don't. I'm sorry, if I'm buying a Bond watch, I don't want someone to be like, oh my god, that's a James Bond watch because it says 007 1,000 times on the dial. Like that just doesn't do it for me. Like it's like McDonald's collect all 12 toys. Like I don't resonate with that. If you're into that,
collect all 12 toys. I love that. I love that.
I mean, that's just my opinion, and I don't hate on anyone if they buy them. Like if you're into that, great. Some people love the gun barrel logo. Like us serious collectors tend to strafe away from that kind of stuff. Like we want subtlety. We want, again, screen accuracy. We want to feel that moment of escapism when we look at our watch, or like we put a certain shirt on, it makes us feel a certain way. It's that connection to the character in our own terms. So I mean, it's definitely more deep than just, oh, I'm buying a James Bond polo. So
yeah.
So I mean, I went on a tangent there. I'm sorry, guys.
No, that's what we do.
Okay,
it's all right. It's all good, man. We'll let the fish draw the line. So
okay, so that was the first model. The other model I have that isn't screen accurate, it's actually my GoldenEye diver, which is the first watch. It's a quartz movement. I believe it's you'll have to help me, Schmidt. It's a 1509. No, it's
Dude,
not
I
right.
don't know. It doesn't matter.
I can't
It's
remember.
the golden IC master. Okay,
It's
it's
a
fun.
quartz movement, ETA modified movement. So anyway, this one's fun because this one I figured out pretty quickly. They're actually, so in 93 when the model was released, which GoldenEye came out in 95, the original model was made with tritium indices. And as you all know, tritium ceased to be used.
Little radioactive.
Yeah, and after 20 years, you're not getting any glow from those puppies, and they tend
Mhm.
to age not so well.
Yeah.
So the one that Pierce Brosnan wore on screen was actually a tritium version, which
Yeah.
the way you can tell the difference. So they were made from 93 till a little bit into 97, probably ended production at the end of 96. So you're looking at 3 years of production. They're typically brown by the time you find them. Because just the radioactiveness is deteriorating.
Yeah, the decay looks
Half-Life.
crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Half-Life, baby.
And then another fun fact is when you look at the dial, the 3 in 300 meters is asymmetrical, which versus the updated version, which is actually symmetrical 3. And then the F is more curved in feet than it's more straight up, and there's like a little bend at the tip of the
so when you're talking about the asymmetrical 3, you're talking about the top loop of the 3 is smaller than the bottom loop. The bottom loop is bigger, and then the top loop and the bottom loop on the other ones are basically the same size.
Exactly. Yeah. So those were the 3 differences between the models, between the 2 models. So after that, 97, which in Tomorrow Never Dies, they moved to an automatic movement in The World's Not Enough and Die Another Day. It was the same watch in all 3. It was an automatic Diver 300, and it had super luminoval indices.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously getting a little bit more with the times, a better material, a little R&D going into their product after GoldenEye.
So basically the one that you have that's technically not as screen accurate is, I assume you have an SLN dial on yours. Is that the correct?
Yes. So after 97 with the quartz, they kept everything the same except for the 3 things I noted, but it's still a quartz movement, same quartz movement. So same reference, same watch, but when you find one for just shy over $1,000, you buy it. Buy it, and you just say good enough.
And you know what's great? I mean, and that's kind of funny because you said it's the same reference, same movement, same everything, with the exception of the dial and those little key nuances that you talked about, which kind of brings us back to the Rolex thing.
Sure does.
With the Submariner, because technically the 6538 could be the reference 100%. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not. I'm not a Rolex collector. I'm not a historian, and I don't get paid a ton of money to figure these things out. But what I find is so interesting is the fact that it has the same reference, but there's so many different nuances, even within that reference range of production, that makes this watch unusual. And again, I'm not going to sit here and try to say that I'm trying to reinvent the wheel, or I'm going to do a gotcha moment on anything. I'm just finding it very interesting that the watch is so touted as the quote unquote archetypal James Bond Submariner really was never even worn in the film, because it's not the same watch. And that's so strange to me. And again, it's just like getting back to the screen accuracy thing. I just find it so funny that watch collectors or, the Bond community at large just either has overlooked this or doesn't care, or maybe it's one of those things like the Mandela effect, where we just like all kind of cohesively remember it to be the big triangle, or the red triangle with the big crown, and that's kind of what we remember, and that's what we believe to be true, but it's actually not true. So I don't know. I just thought that this is kind of a weird thing, and I know I had touched on this with Bro before, and he's like, yeah, we should talk about this, because I don't know.
I just thought he wore the Black Bay 58. So,
and again, you talk about another iconic. Like, you look at the gilt Black Bay 58. It's got a red triangle.
Yep, red triangle.
The gilt markers, big crown. I mean, and people buy that watch because they can't get the 6538, because again, that's the James Bond Submariner, but it's not. It might be the same reference, But that particular watch that's always sold as the Bond watch is not the one that he wears in the movie.
Well, I'll
I
throw you an
can't find a
example.
single image of it.
I'll throw you an example, right? The Seiko speed timer that I have, the 6139.
Oh yeah, the
It
Bruce
was
Lee, right?
right. It was so the one that I have was touted as the Bruce Lee for the longest time. Upon further research, people found out that his variant had, I can't remember what day wheel. I think it was like Cantonese or Thai or something. I can't remember what it is, but he's got that. And then to the left side of the dial, there's different wording. On that one, it says waterproof. So like the
Ooh.
wording, there's no resistance. It's proof. They call it the proof dial. So little things here and there kind of mess that around. So people who bought the Bruce Lee like I have for more money thinking, okay, I got Bruce Lee's exact watch. I don't know. Maybe they are a little disappointed because they didn't get the exact one because his variant is obviously super rare.
Yeah.
You know, so that's just an
obviously
example
different.
for more accessible collecting, but I think it's something that happens fairly often.
But I mean, and that's the thing that's so crazy about this, because I mean, you talk about more accessible collecting. I mean, you know, I know those watches they go for a decent amount of money.
Yeah,
they're not
super cheap. No,
but they're also not, you know, super expensive. We're talking about an extremely expensive watch, right? You look at some of these big crown red triangle subs.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at one right now that's sold on Rowing Blazers for $575,000. Like, what?
Oh, I need a minute.
I mean, and that's I mean, that's probably on the super high end. You know, I don't know that that's like a common price.
Are they passing it off as Connery's actual watch?
I mean, but even still, like I'm looking at
Grays,
one right now,
pussies, Gore's, breasts.
yeah. Also, she wore a Rolex too. She wore a GMT Master.
Yeah,
but I'm looking at another sub from Sotheby's. Actually, the estimate for this watch is 180 to 280,000.
Yeah, that's the range.
A lot. That's a lot of money for a watch.
That's a lot of watches.
I mean, exactly. I mean, just in general, it's a lot of watches. But I mean, like this is not an insignificant amount of money, and for this potentially to be the wrong watch,
right? If you're paying for screen accuracy, I would be pretty chapped if it turned out it was.
Because again, everywhere that I look this up, it's James Bond Submariner, James Bond Submariner. You know, Doctor No, Thunderball. You know, From Russia with Love, Submariner. Like it's not that watch. If you look at the film, you look at the movies, these two watches don't line up at all.
You're slowly destroying some millionaires' dreams right now, Schmidt.
There's so like I've just found so many inconsistencies between these images that I just can't pin down. That to me seems so strange, and that's what I find is very interesting. Now I know the world of Rolex is like, especially at like early Rolex, there's so much nuance and there's so many different things. You could literally write encyclopedias on all the references.
Transitional models.
So exactly. And that's the thing for me. Is this a legitimate Rolex? Yeah, it's got to be 100%. That's a hill I'm willing to die on. But what I find so interesting about this is the idea that all of these other watches are being sold as this piece, and it's not, because it may have the same reference, but there's always a subtle nuance between these models that I have not seen another one on the internet, on a forum, on a posting, on anything
with
that is exactly the same as the one that I see on Sean Connery's wrist. And that's what blows my mind. I don't know if this is some super rare transitional model, if it's like a 6536 case with the slim lugs that got, you know, transitionally upgraded to the newer water resistance at 200 meters. So you know what? It's got the original bezel from the 6536 with the non-graduations, but you know what? We'll put a big crown on it because it's got a higher water resistancy now. Like, I don't know, but it doesn't make sense that it's not on the other ones. And the other big thing that I forgot to mention, the 6538s, they had a caliber 1030 in them. It was the same, according to my research, it was the same caliber that was in the 6536. The difference being is at the very end of the production cycle, the 6536, which is about a year or so, they became chronometer certified. So as they changed the reference, the 6538 started getting chronometer certifications, which added additional lines of text on the dials. When you look at the watches in the film, there's only 2 lines of text at the bottom, which is where Rolex used to put officially certified chronometer on those watches. It was at the bottom at 6 o'clock, whether above the depth rating or below Submariner. It was in one of those 2 spots. That's why they call them 4-liners, because it had 4 lines of text. Right. It's not there. So even if this is a 6538, it's got the water resistance rating. It only says Submariner. There's no chronometer certification, which lends me to believe that maybe this was a dial and a movement from a 6536 in a case from a 6536 that was upgraded with the big crown for the 6538. Now, that sounds crazy, conspiratorial, doesn't make any sense. Maybe I'm gonna put my tinfoil hat on, like the guy from Barstool. But it's just so funny to me that like I can't be the only one that noticed this. Like, am I taking crazy pills?
I don't think you're taking crazy pills, man. I don't think you are. Look. There's also the fact that maybe something happened to the watch and it was damaged. Thus, they saved the movement, which would be a lot cheaper to replace the case and a bezel ring versus a movement. And maybe that's what happened. Who knows? I mean, that's the shitty part. But if Rolex was keeping records back then, there's a chance there's a way to find out. But who knows?
Yeah, it just blows my mind that nobody else has dug this up. Like, I have not seen anybody talk about it ever, like on anything.
Well, who knows? Maybe this is an internet breaking phenomenon here on Rich Cheese Radio.
I love it.
I would love to break the internet. Just
damage a lot of pre-owned big time watch sales. You
just see Rolex Submariners become Disney stock and just like nosedive into the ground.
Wow.
Was it too soon?
No.
Take your pick. Disney, Netflix.
Yeah, Disney, Netflix, Twitter. Yeah, a lot of crazy stock boys are going up right now. So, but yeah, so I don't know. So listeners out there, if you are vintage Rolex collectors and you know quite a bit about this, and I'm just crazy and I don't know anything, I'm an uneducated schlub on the internet that doesn't know anything about vintage Rolex. If that's the case, school me, please. I'd love to know. I just find it very odd that everywhere I go, it's a big crown with a red triangle.
It's not even just that. It's just the fact that, like you said, the variances between the models and the years, like and there's no information about it. That's crazy. This famous watch,
exactly, like arguably one of the most famous watches.
Yes, is and you don't know I mean, you make some valid points. You make some very valid points, my friend.
It's almost like crazy, man. Almost like the moon landing Speedmaster going missing. How is that possible?
They left it in the studio.
Stop it. You're gonna get me triggered.
Is there room under that tin hat for me too, Schmidt?
Yes, exactly. all the room under the tin hats. But yeah, so there's my little rant about the origins of the James Bond Rolex Submariner. Maybe it is the Submariner, maybe it's not the Submariner. Maybe it is a 6538, maybe it's a 6536. Who knows? Maybe it's a transition. I'm sure our keyboard warriors that listen to the Rashid's Radio podcast will do some fact checking on it. If you guys find it, please DM us. I'd love to really know, truly and honestly. So if there's somebody out there that does know and I'm just smoking crack, please let me know.
So I do have a question for you guys on this topic. So since we are talking about the original vintage Connery Rolex that was worn on screen, where do you guys fall in the scope of Rolex being the Rolex Submariner being the James Bond watch?
Ooh,
and
don't
you
get
can
me started.
I'll go into this. You can go as deep as you want. You can go as shallow as you want. I don't care. I just want to get the opinion of two gentlemen that aren't, I would say, infatuated with the character and more or less are more interested in the actual piece. So will you take it away?
Shh. No.
Bro,
Not
take it
talking
away.
No,
about
it's
this.
all good. I gave that I gave that up on wrist check. It's all good. So here's my thing, right? As somebody who got to know James Bond as a young kid in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
for me, my first Bond is Pierce Brosnan because that's the
Yeah.
first one I knew, right? So for me, that blue aluminum bezel Seamaster is always going to be it for me. It's in the GoldenEye video game, right? He's shooting the laser out of it. There was nothing cooler than that at that time, right? There you go. Now, obviously, as I got older, it was, and I'm going to be honest, it was weird to know that there were more than one James Bond. I was like, what do you mean Sean Connery's James Bond? It's Pierce Brosnan.
You're lying.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
Exactly.
lying.
I know James Bond. He gets hit with a lime and misses Doubtfire. I've seen it, okay? So,
He was undercover.
that's right. So for me, that was my quintessential Bond was Pierce Brosnan, and I thought he portrayed the role very well. He's very smooth. He's very debonair, whatever you want to call it. So I always knew it as an Omega. Now I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm assuming I know the answer to this, but now supposedly in the book Casino Royale, you have the quote that Bond could never wear just any watch; it had to be a Rolex. Is it a coincidence that we got in Casino Royale, the movie, the Rolex Omega line?
I think that
I've actually never thought about that.
I think that had a couple angles to it. I think it was Omega's way of kind of taking a jab at Rolex because of the fact of here we are, 10 years later, and we've been on Bond's wrist consistently for 4 films at this point. Well, now 5 films at that point. And they wanted to establish like dominance of this is our character,
Yeah.
And there's also the fact of I think this is funny because the books were written, Ian Fleming wrote the first book, I believe in 1953 was his first when he wrote Dr. No. So way before, it was ever on screen, these books and these words were being put to the page, so it's just to compare. That's like me saying like, oh, the best watch right now is blah blah blah. Well, that's in 2022. Who knows what the best watch is going to be in 2032.
Yeah.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
relevancy starts tapering off from there. So now you're trying to compare something that's written over 60 years ago, 70 years ago almost, and it's just like, well, styles change. I mean, we're all not wearing zoot suits out, I'll tell you that.
So I think I mean, for me, I mean, we all kind of grew up in the same era of Bond as well. For me, my Bond was Pierce Brosnan too, and subsequently Daniel Craig, which I love. I really think he redefined the role in the best way possible. But anyway, for me, I grew up with the laser pit, Seamaster and the remote detonator and the helium valve and all of these cool gadgets that were awesome on the Seamaster that I distinctly remember, and that for me will be my Bond watch. But the other thing too that I like to approach it, because I am such a fan of Omega and the history of the brand. I also know historically it made sense for James Bond to wear an Omega because of the historical ties of Omega actually supplying the British military with watches during World War II. That's something that I don't think a lot of people really understand or really know, but it was historically accurate. And that's one of the major reasons why Lindy Hemming, the costume designer for GoldenEye, when she was basically coming to reinvigorate the character, because let's be honest, after Timothy Dalton left the franchise, like we really didn't know if we were going to get another James Bond reboot, because the 80s, like kind of like nobody cared. And so when GoldenEye came into the world, it was kind of like, for me, looking back on it now, this is almost like a make or break it film. Like if it wasn't successful, we wouldn't probably have continued the James Bond franchise because it would have needed a serious reboot to get it back into shape. So, and I think GoldenEye did that. But one of the things that I know from Lindy Hemming in interviews that I've seen from her, when she talks about this, she says, historically speaking, he would have been issued a Seamaster anyway, because that's what his actual real life counterparts would have been issued. It made sense historically. So, and trying to reinvigorate the character, she wanted to put him in something that was unexpected and revolutionary and different, which I thought was very cool. So for me, it makes sense that he wears that. Plus, if you look at the other things too, going back to the literature, right? Everyone's like, oh, but it's in the books. He wears a Rolex. I mean, it's fine. He also drives a Bentley in the books.
Yeah.
And last time I checked, James Bond is not driving a Bentley. He's driving an Aston Martin. So there's also these aspects that, sometimes tropes exist, but as you pointed out, better things come along that make more sense for the character. I mean, he's not sleuthing around England in a V12, Bentley. Okay. Like, or it's Bentley, right? Like, or Rolls Royce. It's Bentley, right? I think it's what it is.
Yeah. He rocks the Bentley.
Yeah, it's a V12. It's a V12 Bentley. Like, you're not stealthily pulling up on anybody in that thing, right? Like, it's just crazy.
You're not stealthily pulling up in a DB5 either. So, I mean, but at least it's if I don't know, like I think seeing something on screen, that continuously evolves versus this was written again almost 70 years ago, and that's it. Things change, things evolve.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it was funny because like there was this article Forbes wrote when GoldenEye was being made, and they said it was the $50 million risk not worth taking. So
Wow.
like 6 years hiatus from License to Kill. We got a very young Del Toro in there. You got David. I can't think of his last name right now. Plays Sanchez. He's David. Come on, you guys know this guy. He's got like the kind of like acne on his face. David Duvall, is that his name? No.
Duchovny?
No.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know.
Anyway, and it's basically a James Bond movie that doubles as a Miami Vice episode. So it's just like, you get all these aspects that just aren't Bond, and there's an equation to these films, and sometimes they just, they miss their mark. But I mean, GoldenEye literally saved this franchise, and like you were talking about, Schmidt, about Lindy and she had to fight tooth and nail to get Omega in that movie.
Yeah.
Like I watched an interview with my buddy David Zaritsky over at the Bond Experience, and
we watched the same interview. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And she like went in pretty heavy detail about how like they were like there was a lot of pushback. And since then, the relationship has blossomed. I feel like there's been some really great things. There have been some things that I've kind of questioned, but for the most part, I think it's been a healthy relationship, and it's worked. And I really think it's kind of taken to Bond as a signature thing now. I really, people ask me all the time, do you see Bond wearing something else? And I'll say like, anything's possible, but in my heart of hearts, I just can't see it at this point. It's like saying, anytime you see an Aston Martin, you don't think of 007. Like, it's just like, it's very difficult to do.
Sure.
Yeah. It's hard now to separate the character from that aspect. Like, okay, maybe he doesn't drink Heineken in the next film, or okay. But when you think of Bond, you think of Aston, right? And even now, like when you go back and you watch Pierce Brosnan and he drives a BMW in like some of the films at the end, you're like, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. Especially, given what we know about the character and what he has driven or will drive later on, right?
Right.
So it's just kind of like it to me now. It's like, as much as the Submariner may have been the first watch, it's no longer the Bond watch. That's and fair. As we've pointed out, even the ones that they're selling aren't even Bond watches.
Oh, zing.
there's some Rolex collectors that are just like angrily typing away in the comments right now. They're gonna blow me up.
They're gonna kill you.
I welcome it. I welcome the challenge. I was born in the dark.
So I do have another question for you guys. So where do you guys land on this new one that just came out with No Time to Die? Were you guys like impressed with it? Was it a grower, or was it a shower? Like what, where do you land on the new No Time to Die watch? Like, did you love it right off the rip, or were you kind of like, ooh, it kind of grew on you?
Bro,
I liked it. I mean, I like the kind of vintage aesthetic, and I don't mind the Fotino, whatever you want to call it. I really didn't have a problem. The bracelet looks awesome. I really like the color scheme, to be honest. And obviously it's a 300 meters, so it's a dope watch. So I know a lot of people were kind of iffy on it, but I think off the bat I liked it. It's just I just was like, there's probably no way I'm gonna get one.
Yeah. I mean, and just to clarify, are you talking about the film itself, or are you talking about the watch, or both?
Oh, I'm talking about the watch.
Okay. I wasn't sure because I know you and I have talked about the film. I will say this: I absolutely love the watch, and I know from my colleagues that are still in the industry that carry the line, they can't keep them in stock. I mean, this is probably one of the most high profile, high selling Omega watches, period. And I think it was truly innovative for them to do it in titanium, to do it on a mesh bracelet, which I don't think anybody saw coming, to do this tropical color scheme. I think the watch is fantastic. I mean, you own it. So, I mean, what are your thoughts? Obviously, you got to like it.
Well, so this is funny because at first when I saw the spy shots and I started realizing it was brown, I was not. I was going to buy it regardless. It's a screen accurate watch, and because I'm a collector through and through, but I was a little worried, and I didn't know it was a Milanese bracelet. It looked like, I don't know, it looked like some kind of like sheen leather or like like some flat metal, like modern ass like looking bracelet, and I was like, what the fuck is this? But anyway, I wasn't really jiving with it because I was just like, God, it just looks very. It was trying to be vintage,
Yeah.
and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. And let's be clear, and I learned a very valuable lesson with this release is until you get the piece in your hand, please reserve your judgment, because
Yeah.
once I held it and I kind of had that experience of seeing it with my own eyes, it plays so differently than it does in a photograph. This watch does not photograph well. That's the first piece
No.
I'll tell you.
And I'll say that a large part of this is due to the crystal. It's because of that high dome bubble crystal and sapphire. It reflects all the light in these weird angles that either makes the dial look super shiny or makes the dial like wash out completely, depending on how the light is. You have to see this watch in person because the domed effect of that crystal is everything. It looks fantastic in person, and I love the tropical color that they did. Because again, like I'm not a person to be like, oh, brown is a sexy color, I want that on my wrist. But when you see it, damn, does it look good. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, and so I was secretly hoping for an appearance of the original 300 in the movie somewhere, like in Jamaica, like whether it be in a dish or, in a watch box of some sort or anything like that. I thought that would have been really, really cool, like just like a nod back to the original. But
yeah, but then you'd have to go find a $20,000 vintage Seamaster, and you'd be not too happy on the wallet for sure.
That's true. Maybe it'll be screen accurate.
Touche.
Touche. As long as it's screen accurate, though, right? Like there you go.
Yeah, I mean, of course. Look, at the end of the day, this watch was it was for Omega. It was a home run. Like it really was.
Yeah.
No matter what everyone has said, like, and I've heard everything under the sun about this watch, but I have noticed that people that were kind of dismissing the watch in the beginning have changed their tune, and whether they want to admit it or not, that's up, that's on them. But it's funny because like I was talking with Kat Shoulders over at 10 and 2, and she ended up buying the watch, and I was surprised because when they first saw it and her and Kat did a review on the watch, they weren't fans of the watch at all, and she picked it up and she ended up moving on from it. And then me and her were chatting. She's like, I kind of want that watch back. And I'm sitting there like, are you kidding me? Like I feel like I've never sold a piece from my collection, so I don't understand that feeling.
Yeah.
But I just can't imagine selling something, and then I think that's what gives me the fear of selling something, is I don't want to get in the situation where I was like, damn it, I shouldn't have sold that.
Yeah. And then you have to go clamor to get it back. And it's
that,
never as easy as when you got it the first time.
Shit, no, there's no way. So yeah, that was the first person I had talked to where I had run into that scenario where they had owned it, moved on from it, and then was like, you know what, I think I need that back. I don't know if she ever got it back or if she still wants it, but this conversation was like a few months ago. But yeah, it's a very difficult piece to keep in stock. I know it's limited production. I know that they're going to eventually stop production on it sooner rather than later, I would think. I know they said originally it was supposed to go out of production when the next film was coming out, but I don't know how true that is with all the delays and stuff.
Yeah.
That's
what I had heard too.
Yeah, a completely different timeline. So it's just like, I think a lot of people the funniest thing was when the watch was released, a lot of people were like, oh, I'll just wait a few months till after the movie comes out and then I'll get it for $4 or $5 off.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Who's
4
holding
or
the shit
5
bag
grand
now?
off. Yeah.
Who's holding the
Yeah.
shit bag now? And it's
Now
just
you
like,
can barely get it, and you're certainly getting it at retail. I mean, there's
retail or more in some
it is what it
cases.
is.
But like, it just amazes me. I think my biggest gripe with the release was the fact that Omega decided to do a NATO version and then do a Milanese version. It's like, just put the NATO in package and sell one model. Like, just be done with it.
Well,
Like,
I mean, but think of it this way, man. And this is just me, knowing how Omega operates and all this different stuff when they make different models. Like when I used to work with the brand and sell them, at least it gave people the option to make a purchase. And I know that at times, given the popularity of that watch, if there was only one reference, there's a lot of people who would not have that watch today. Because I know a lot of people bought it on the NATO strap because they couldn't get it on the bracelet. And then they would order the bracelet later to have basically both looks. Like, without that NATO reference, that would have never been possible. And I guarantee you half the people that own that watch would not own it.
Maybe.
I kind of
I mean,
NATO.
I would love.
You have to admit, like, the thing with that watch is, like, it's not an easy watch to make. I mean, the mesh bracelets in titanium, for Christ's sake.
Of
I mean,
course.
that cannot be an easy process to manufacture. There had to be some production delays. There had to be some stuff that caused those watches to not maybe come out as fast as Omega wanted.
Well, then, and the botch,
and then you throw COVID in there.
Yeah, the botch of the release and the movie being shifted so much, like,
yeah, that's
there's no way to really tell. And but here's my follow-up to that. Okay, you made a very valid point, but my follow-up to that is, how many people bought the NATO and then turned around and bought the Milanese afterwards? Or how many people bought the Milanese and then turned around and bought the NATO afterwards? I'll tell you what I did, and I know everyone I've talked to has. So if you're doing that anyway, which, I mean, money's money. It's like, just charge 10 grand for the damn thing and just sell it. Like this is what it is. Like, I just, like, at the end of the day, and then the reference matches. Now you run into the thing where, if you do get to the point where you're reselling this piece, to a collector, guess what? If the reference isn't the reference of the Milanese, a collector is going to probably give you the pass. So you run into that.
I mean, I guess. But it's literally the same watch, like identical.
Well,
it's the same watch, and technically,
pretty much the same watch.
And technically, both watches were screen worn.
They were screen worn, but only one was worn by Bond.
Well,
I mean,
one was worn by 007 and one was worn by Bond, so that's fine.
Bond was 007 at the end, if you want to be technical. So I mean, I know, dude.
I know this is all the stupid stuff.
This is all the stupid minutiae.
Bros is laughing over in the corner.
This is what it's all about, right here.
This is why we show up.
That's it.
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about this. What are we doing here?
But yeah. Technically, both of them are screen worn. Both the NATO strap version and the Milanese bracelet version. So I think that's also cool too.
No, I thought that was great. I wish Bond would award on the NATO at some point. Like, I think that would have been awesome. Like, when he was like fishing or whatever, it would have been cool. Like, to kind of see him change the straps out or something like that. Like, just sell it as a complete package. That's kind of my thing. Yeah, I do like that they didn't make it a limited edition like the Spectre, because I think there was a lot of people that felt like they missed out on something, that they really wanted.
Yeah, and now people are still trying to find that dang watch, and it's been
forever.
7 years. Like, I mean,
man,
yeah,
I got mine. I got mine 2 years after, and I'll tell you what, I paid a premium, and you know what? I don't regret it for 1 second because that's how bad I wanted that watch. And I
Yeah.
think that's when you know.
And people are still trying to get that watch 7 years later, and you're gonna get a double premium. Like that is a watch that's going up in value and certainly maintaining it for sure. And that watch is fantastic. It's such a cool watch.
Bro looks checked out.
No, honestly,
Are you two done bickering?
My last question sort of piggybacks off what we were just talking about is, where do you think we go from here? I think that's the question on everybody's mind. I know a lot of people have a certain group of actors picked out and sort of what they think is going to happen. From the man himself, Omega Bond watches. What do you got?
I mean, I will tell you the person I would love to be Bond that won't be, and I will tell you the person who I think will be Bond based on just a few factors. But so the person I wanted to be Bond was Michael Fassbender.
Okay.
The scene in Inglourious Bastards in the tavern, I was sold. In that moment, I was like, this dude would be an amazing Bond. I think he would bring, the tenacity and the charm also that we haven't seen in a while. I love Daniel Craig, but he wasn't the suavest Bond in my book.
I almost feel like after seeing him as an android in the Alien series, it almost gives me a feeling for like his range and ability to play somebody who can be both like stoic and then also go like full Magneto when he has to rage.
Yep. So like, yeah, he was my pick, but in my opinion, just he's a little too old for the role now. Unfortunately, I think he'd make a great villain.
Sure.
Like maybe like a modified, like, Alec Trevelyan, like a Sean Beam type, situation. The person I think it's going to be might be too mainstream of a pick, but Henry Cavill, I think
that's who I hope it is.
Yeah, he just missed the role. He came in second place to Daniel Craig when he screen tested First Kissing Royale.
And Barbara Broccoli actually really liked him.
Yeah,
and from what I understand in the screen tests.
Yeah, I think it could still happen for him. I know time is kind of ticking on him also. I think the age thing does play a factor in these things.
But he's still relatively young. I mean, he's not like
he's 50s. There. No, he's in his late 30s. I mean, he's a little older than Daniel was when he started. I think Man from U.N.C.L.E. was a great. That was
a great indicator for sure.
Yeah, that was like, okay, he can do this. It would be a very different direction from physique standpoint for Bond. Like he's a very
he's
present.
Jacked.
Yeah, he would.
President is putting it mildly. Yeah, for sure. The dude is built.
But if you think about it, Bond's a naval commander, I mean, he was
a military guy.
Jacked. Yeah,
he would have been built too.
Yeah, so I mean, I do like that aspect of it, but if we were following history, I feel like it would be a no-namer. Like I really feel like it'd be someone lesser known. I feel like Richard Madden has a pretty good shot outside of Henry Cavill.
Yeah, but his physique to me just doesn't seem like it's the commanding, because he seems like a really small guy. I mean, and arguably Daniel Craig is pretty small, but Daniel Craig's at least built. Yeah. Like I don't know if Richard Madden has the physique that I would expect that James Bond would have.
Someone said, who was it? Robert Pattinson. And I was like, you can't be Bond with that, man. There's no way. Like there has to be lines. You can only be super.
I would never want him to be James Bond.
No,
I would never want him to be James Bond for sure.
I couldn't see
question for you.
He doesn't have the rugged for me.
Yeah.
Bond's got a little rugged to him.
I have buddies who just saw Batman. They said he was the worst Batman they've ever seen. Now, I'm not a superhero comic book kind of person myself. I don't watch Marvel. I don't watch DC. That's just me. But,
who hurt you?
Just never got into it. Like I watched the first few films and then like they just kept coming out and coming out and coming out. I was like, I'm so far removed from this. Like I would have to watch like 50 movies
binge,
just to catch up.
You got to get in there. You got to get in there.
No,
just
I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do it,
Bro, what do you
Plus,
think
everything's
about?
all crazy now with the universe, and it's just too many characters and too many people to like try to digest. But anyway, question for you, Mister Omega Bond Watches. Um, do you think we'll get the new Bond announcement at the 60th anniversary?
I think there's a
That
good
would be
shot.
kind of an opportune time, right?
I mean, it would make sense. I hope so. I also know that we'll probably be getting a 60th anniversary Bond watch from Omega. So
Exciting.
I mean, like, I think
Is that your
that
prediction?
happening. I feel good about it. I think there is potential for there to be something Bond related coming out from Omega at the end of this year. I mean, just based on some of the other
Because when
brands,
is the
how
official
they're
anniversary?
reacting.
Do you know?
October 5th. So
October
that was
5th. Okay.
October 5th was
Mark your
the
calendars.
October 5th, Global James Bond Day. Also, the reason it's Global James Bond Day is that was the day that they released Dr. No in theaters. October 5th,
Ah,
1962.
Ah.
So there you go. That's why that's the day.
October 5th, 1962. I like
Yeah.
it.
So typically, I mean, I think it'd be cool. And I think the thing that's kind of skirting under the radar right now is the Amazon purchase of MGM
Yeah.
Studios.
Has it officially finalized?
It was finalized, I think, 2 months ago, and there has
Okay.
already been some rumblings and moves happening. There will be what's that show called? That reality show where they travel across the world.
Oh,
Amazing
yeah,
Race?
like Rat Race or
Yes,
Amazing Race.
Amazing Race. They are taking
They were doing a
applications.
Bond version, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yours truly has put an application in, so who knows? But you gotta shoot your shot. But if I get on there, I will be calling Omega and begging them to let me have some sort of sponsorship.
Yeah, for sure.
No, it's cool. I think it somehow, some way, they need to get the franchise to be relevant to a younger fan base and get people attached. And I think this is a cool, different way of doing it. Would this be my first choice? I have no idea. But I do find it interesting. While I tune in, absolutely, because I'd like to see how many other people out there in the world are as crazy as I am. And I mean, there's just like you got to do something with it. And I feel like if everyone tries to do what Marvel has done and create a multiverse of characters and timelines, and I mean, let's be clear, the last 10 years Marvel has made fistfuls and fistfuls of cash. However, I feel like their product and their quality is starting to suffer. Like, if I'm being 100, like at some point people walk away from the project that are the originals and the brain, the brain keepers of the whole thing, and you start seeing it, inaccuracies,
the fatigue and everything. Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, it had its moment.
You start making too many watches, quality control goes down.
Absolutely.
Or if you don't make enough. I mean,
there you go.
Pew, pew, pew.
I like it. I like it. Bringing us back full circle.
I like to play both sides of the fence here. There's always grass isn't always greener on the other side.
True.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Bro, do you got anything else to ask our esteemed guest?
Last thing, your go-to martini.
Oh, dude. Obviously a Vesper, and those are not for the faint of heart, because for the don't
three, you're feeling it.
Honestly, I know my number with those. If I have 3, it's like, okay, this is like Kenny Loggins' danger zone now. It's like if I go for that 4th one, it's like bad shit happens. So for those that don't know, a Vesper Martini was the first drink introduced in Casino Royale, which is the first book and essentially the first Bond movie. When you look at Casino Royale, and he drinks a Vesper Martini because that's the love of his life. Anyway, I digress. It's 3 parts gin, 1 measure of vodka, and then a half measure of quinolette, which they don't even make that anymore, so it's just Liette. And I like mine with Belvedere vodka and Gordon's, like the original, and then obviously I like to do Americana instead of Liette, but Liette's the original, so it doesn't matter when it comes to that. But those things are they're strong, but they're really refreshing, and you're getting your
Yes, they
booze.
are.
You're not playing around when you're
It's
drinking
just straight booze. I mean, that's it.
100%.
You
100%.
you garnish with a little bit of a lemon peel, and there you go.
Yeah,
I mean,
lemon
it's
twist, and you're
straight.
good to go.
It's
Bro,
it's
you
straight
ever had
alcohol.
one?
I have not. I'm gonna have one now.
Oh,
You got to get a Vesper.
Well, you know what
man.
it is? If I'm
Vesper
gonna get that,
martinis
if
are
I'm
awesome.
gonna get that, I'm gonna get that in a really like classy place. Like I want it to be well made. I don't want to have somebody just throw it together and be like, "Here you go," and it's gonna be just a pile of
that's
booze.
not a
You know what I
dive
mean?
bar drink. It's
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
a nice dining drink.
Like when I was
for sure.
in Spain, I had like a life changing gin and tonic, and I remember
Oh,
that like
wow.
it was unbelievable. It was like juniper and dried fruit and all this stuff in it, and it was super refreshing, and I'll never forget it. It was served in like a goblet. It was amazing. So like I would wait for another experience like that to grab something of that caliber.
So when you're in Vegas, I will take you to
There
the
we go.
Vesper bar for a Vesper. That is where you do it.
There
and
we
they
go.
Do it right. Yeah.
On the bucket list now.
On the bucket list. Come to Vegas. We'll walk by the Rolex store and look at all the empty cases, and then we'll go to Omega.
No, it's okay. They have exhibition models.
I'll press my cheeks to the window. Great.
Which cheeks?
Schmidt, you got anything else for our friend here?
No, man, nothing else that I want to pick his brain about. I mean, we've talked a lot. We've gone a little bit longer than we normally do, but that's all good.
This has been great, guys. Thank you
tons
so
of
much
fun.
for having me. Hopefully, when there's another Bond release, we can get back together and we can kind of pick it apart.
Let's do it. I'm down.
All right, guys. Well,
Let's
thanks for
do it.
having me
Let's
on.
do it.
I really do appreciate it. And it's been awesome, and it's really different to be on this side of the microphone, if I may. But you guys are definitely good at your craft. So thank you again for the invite.
Yeah, man, it's our pleasure. We're sincerely glad that you were able to make this work and fit us in your schedule and everything like that. So thank you for recording with us.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. It's always nice to see somebody kind of project their passion, especially if it's something that like I'm not super in tune with, like the Bond community. So it's cool to see that come out as something I'm familiar with, but not super deep into. So again, thanks a lot for hopping on, and for all our listeners at home, this has been episode 27. Thanks for tuning in. Later.
Peace.